and consulting. She's an executive advisor and leadership consultant. She helps Fortune 50 organizations connect with people, connect performance. She is a U of M grad, unfortunately. She's kind of Michigan. Did I say that out loud? I said that out loud.
You did. Go
Blue. But anyway, Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rod. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what inspired Be Human, Lead Human?
So I was inspired to write Be Human, Lead Human because I experienced a leadership example that up until that point in my career of 16 years of working, I had not seen a leader lead like that. And I really wanted to know and dig into what made this leader so effective and so different from any other leader that I had seen. And so it was actually that experience that was the catalyst for me to go back and do my MBA. It was the catalyst for me to do my PhD. And then ultimately, it was the catalyst for me to write the book that we're talking about today, Be Human, Lead Human.
Well, what made that person special?
So that person was special because they made me feel seen and they made me feel heard for the first time in my corporate career. And it wasn't just about, the output that I could have for the organization. Mm-hmm. It was about seeing me as a human being and all of the different talents and skills that I was able to bring to that position.
Okay. So how did they do that though? I guess, I think one of the things that we're all searching for as leaders, and when you and I both coach and work with, corporations and leaders and founders and startups and all that. And the, often, and I remember my own journey as a founder, we're searching for, because often when we start these businesses or when we get into management, maybe even the first time or maybe throughout our career, we never really, in a lot of ways, not try. We because we're good at something, maybe we're technically good at something, we get promoted, right? Or
exactly.
But what made this person how did they know to recognize you and to see you and to hear you and to make you feel valued? Like, what did they learn that? Was that something? I mean, this person obviously pretty well now, but is that something they learned? Something did they have good examples? Tell me the story. I want to hear stories here.
Yeah. So actually, I'll tell you the story of what happened. So at the time I was working at Ford Motor Company, and the economy was not doing very well. We were in a recession. Things were really, really tough. And my department decided that they wanted to have an employee engagement event to try to raise morale and improve spirits. And so they bought some of these, white, thin plastic paper plates that, you have for picnics. And they scattered them on tables in the building I was in. And they bought some crayons and markers and, things like that. And they invited everyone in the building to come down and to fill out a plate. And they wanted it to be a plate of appreciation for someone to help them understand why they were valued and why they mattered and why they were appreciated. And so I sat there, and I thought, well, who am I going to write my plate to? And I really, thought about it for a bit. And then I decided, well, we have a new CEO. His name is Alan Mulally, and he's got a tough job right now. He's trying to save the company from the brink of ruin. And I figured, that's a pretty lonely job at the top of the house. He's probably got a lot of pressure on him. So I'm going to write my appreciation note to Alan. So I wrote on the plate, thank you, Alan, for being the change that we needed to see for the next 100 years, because Ford had just celebrated its 100th anniversary at the time. And I decorated the plate with Superman stickers all around the edges. And then I put it in an interoffice envelope, the kind that has that twine that you make the little figure eight with, and closed it up. And then I put a confidential sticker on it, and I addressed it to him, and I dropped it in an interoffice mail. And I didn't think twice about it. Well, a couple weeks later, I get called down to my boss's office, like my boss's office. And I'm like, this is a time in the economy where everyone's coming to work with a box under their desk, right? Because you don't know when the moment is where you're going to be let go. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like here I am, like I took this risk and I'm going to get whacked. And so I go down to my boss's office, and there's like a couple bosses standing around the circular table in this office. And in the middle of the table is an interoffice envelope. And Rhett, the sticker was undone and the twine had been undone. And
I
I
love it.
immediately knew what was in that envelope, right? And so the leaders told me, we can't get your message to Alan. And I said, well, I'm not really sure I understand why. Like, did we let interoffice mail people go already? Like, what's happening, And they said, no, we really don't think it's appropriate. We can't get it to him. And so they essentially forced me to take back my message that was designated for Alan. So, I'm really not one that follows the rules very well. And so I just decided that really wasn't okay with me. So I took the message back. I walked out of their office. I walked straight out, got into my car, drove over to headquarters, went up to the 12th floor, and Alan wasn't in. And so I asked his assistant if she could possibly give him this envelope when he got back. And she said, sure, no problem. So I went back down the 12 floors, got back in my car and went back to my office. Still not, thinking I'm not going to hear anything about this. A couple weeks later, I have a voicemail on my phone. And it's Alan telling me how much this message meant to him and that he had a tear in his eye and that he just couldn't believe, that I took the time to thank him for, the job that he's doing to basically save the company. And, at that moment, I sat back in my chair because, here I am, a people leader far down the ladder from him, right? He's never met me. And yet he took the time to leave me a voicemail, call me and leave me a voicemail.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, this is amazing to me. This is 16 years into my career. And then a couple weeks after that, I get a package from interoffice mail. So now I know interoffice mail is working, right? And inside the package is a whole bunch of Ford swag. And that was amazing. But the most amazing thing about that package was there was a handwritten letter in that package. And Alan had written me a letter, and on top of it, it said, "Dear Jennifer," and he had put a heart around the word Jennifer. And, that brought a tear to my eye because in that moment, I felt seen and I felt heard. And he had written a message on there, and dated it. And so I put a copy of that letter in my book because I wanted to see people that when you make just even a small gesture of taking the time to write a thank you note to someone, the massive impact that can have, So that was my experience with a leader who took the time to see me as a human being. And that, again, like I mentioned, was the catalyst for me to go on this, nearly 10-year journey of trying to figure out what makes some leaders outstanding and what makes other leaders just average.
Yeah, and we both know Alan, and and he's part of our MG100 group. And did you ever get a chance to tell him that got stopped at some point? Somebody opened that before it got. I mean, did you ever get a chance to tell him that?
Well, he didn't know that, I'm sure, at the time. But when he read the book, he found that out.
How'd that go? Or is that a private conversation?
Well, let's just say that, Alan handled it like he normally handles things. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So, but that's my story. That's the story of the paper plate. And that was actually the catalyst for me to, go forward with my life's work and help leaders get to that place where they can be more human and they can be the leaders that they're meant to be by leading with these values and this empathy and kindness and humanity that, ultimately get us to where we need to be as a society and as a community and as a whole.
You talk about prioritizing people in the book, right? What does that look like practically? I mean, you just gave a massive example of that, but what are some other examples, some sort of real world examples you've seen in your work and as you research the book? What are some examples of and some practical ways that we could prioritize people?
Yeah. So one of the very first ways, I just had a call with a client this morning who was telling me how, his behaviors have shifted since he was coaching with me. And he was explaining to me how at the beginning of our coaching, he was a leader who had all the answers. And it was his way, literally in his words, his way or the highway. And in the debrief session today, he explained to me that like that has really shifted for him to the point where now his direct reports are coming to him and sharing things with him that they would never have shared with him before. So for example, this person came to him and said, I am changing my pronouns. This is how I would like to be known. And these are the pronouns. And so he told me that story. And I said, well, what do you think, prompted that change and how this person is, feeling about their interactions with you and about, the trust that you have and the relationship that you've built? And he said, I listen more. I simply listen more. And it's not my way or the highway anymore. It is the sum of all of the people that I'm talking with and their preferences and their perspectives that help me now make decisions so that I know I don't have to have all the answers anymore. So when you're prioritizing people, that's one very concrete example of how you can do it. Listen more and talk less.
I'm at a big tech conference this week, and we're talking about AI, and we're talking about AGI, and we're talking about the future. We're talking about these sort of big things. And one of the things I'm really curious about from your perspective, and Elon Musk obviously came up, and we had a long talk about some of the culture. I did an interview with somebody that just wrote a book on Twitter's culture and how X, or now what is called X, how the toxic culture that Elon Musk brought to that organization, which I don't think is a secret, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but
yeah,
a lot of leaders like that are really known for hard charging and working 18-hour days and really burning people out.
Yeah.
And you work with Fortune 50 companies, and so about really data-driven companies that have metrics and they have measurements, and you've got to get results. Can you have an organization like that that's really, really tightly run and really expects a lot out of people, and still have this sort of people-centered approach?
I think that's a great question because it presumes that there's a binary aspect to that if you have
Fair enough.
culture, you cannot have a human-centered organization. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Okay.
But I do think that it depends on the leaders that you have and the leaders who are willing to consider a different way, maybe thinking differently. And I think the counterintuitive nature of putting people first is that when you do that, the results actually follow. And they follow in a greater way than they would if you are that hard charging culture where, people are burned out, it's toxic, you've got high attrition, you've got low morale. And those are all a very bad scenario for getting results in the long run and getting them sustainably.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to have people sleeping in the office to
absolutely not.
To get the most out of them, right?
No.
What are, with the pace of change now and with everything that's happening in society and some of those challenges, and we don't need to get into all of them. I think we can assume we know what we're talking about. And I mean, really, like speed of change and all the demands on leadership today. What is your advice to CEOs and founders, and how because to me, I feel like you have to be really intentional about building this type of culture.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Like, how do you intentionally build a culture that is people focused, and what are some of the first steps you have to take? What does that look like?
Yeah, I love that question. So when you are building a people first culture, one of the first things you can do is take a look at your own behavior. What are you role modeling? Because that is what people are observing. That is what people are going to mimic and role model themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
As infants, we learn by mimicking. So in the workplace, as you alluded to at the beginning, right, people are put into leadership positions without the appropriate training. And typically what I've seen, from Jacob Morgan's research is that it's 15 years before people get some type of leadership training in their job.
Yeah.
So if you are intentional about the behaviors that you're exhibiting, and they are people first, human-centric leadership behaviors, that is the first step towards understanding how to build that people-centric culture. One of the things that Alan had changed at Ford Motor Company was, he created a very clear code of conduct, how we are going to interact with one another, how we are going to operate, the kinds of behaviors that were accepted and not accepted. And for example, one of those things was, if you are making a joke at someone else's expense, and this may seem to be a very banal example, but if you're making a joke at someone else's expense, there is nothing that's funny about that. And there's nothing that's funny about piling on with the laughter, because it decreases trust. And then people aren't willing to work together, and you don't have that safe space where you can all come together and share what's going on to help the business move forward, whether it's good or bad. So it's in those very small moments of how you choose to show up and act as a leader that help you determine what kind of culture you're going to have in your organization.
I love this idea about a code of conduct. What were some of the other behaviors that were on that?
Yeah, so one of the first behaviors was people first. Literally, that was one of the first behaviors. And the comment next to that was love them up, right? They may believe differently than you do. They may think differently than you do. They may have a different religion that they practice. Regardless of all of that, they're human beings first. And all of us want to be seen and heard and understood and acknowledged and feel that we matter. And that the work that we do, most importantly, the work that we do has meaning and purpose. And so when you start from that place, all of everything else falls into place, right? So understanding that, like, it's not the products and services in the organization that create value, it's actually the people. Because without the people, you don't have any products and services to offer to the world.
Right. Okay. I like that. Some teaching at Deloitte for a while. Can you share some insights from that?
From my time teaching at Deloitte? So I in the time I was teaching there, I was working on helping consultants build their consulting skill set. So what does that mean to lean in and be a consultant, right? How do you develop that consulting skill set? And one of the very first things we talk about is, how do you listen? How do you hear what your clients are saying? And almost sometimes more importantly, what they're not saying. Because it's what they're not saying that is typically where the challenge is and where the struggle is. And if you can really get in there and figure out what those things are from what they say and they don't say, you are going to be a fantastic consultant, because you're starting out from the perspective of you're hearing them and they feel heard and they feel understood. And so you started to build that trust and that foundation as a trusted advisor for your client right off the bat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Any other insights you got from that time?
I think so. Consulting is a relationship business, right? It's all about the relationship that you build with a potential client, with an existing client. And it's all about when you come at it from a perspective of, what can I give to this relationship? What kind of value can I add to this relationship, rather than, oh, I'm here to just sell you a project and maybe upsell you for something else, very transactional approach. It's the value that you are bringing and giving to that person that actually creates a transformational relationship. And as you and I both know, right, it's how people feel that they remember, not necessarily what you say. So when you engage in a way that they feel seen and heard, and you engage that emotional stickiness of that conversation, that is something that they remember going forward. And that you are the person that they will pick up the phone and call when they have another need.
I was having this conversation today on stage, and I wanted to get your take on it, because I found it a pretty interesting question. It wasn't a challenging question, because I felt pretty confident in the answer. But so the question was, we're in this time of change, right? And there's a lot of uncertainty, whether it's the election, whether it's technology replacing jobs, and uh, people just having this sort of anxiety about where things are going. And the question was, what do I say to my team in this time? And my answer was, I think it's okay to say to people, look, we're a team. We love you. We want to support you, but we don't know where things are going. We don't know, are we going to be regulated out of business? Are we going to make a wrong? We're going to make a pivot here, and it's the wrong one. We can't predict. We can't say and guarantee you that the economy is not going to force us to make changes or make shifts. We can't guarantee you that you're going to be here in 5 years or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is. But, what we can say is, we appreciate today. We appreciate what you're doing. And so I think not promising is the right answer. I mean, saying we care, we want to do the best for you and for the company, but we don't know. What do you think? What's that? And I felt like that's an honest answer that says, I can't make you a promise that I can't keep as a CEO. But we recognize the anxiety, we recognize the fear, and but we're going to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate answer. I think there's also a couple things that I would maybe add on to that. I think first and foremost, no promises, right? No one knows what's going to happen. We can't promise anything. But here's what we do know, and here's what we can help with, right? I think to give that hope and that support to people.
This is what we're watching and paying attention to, and we'll continue to communicate, right?
Exactly. So reassuring them that you will be transparent and will communicate what's happening as you learn it, so that they know, they're not going to be kept in the dark, right? They're kept in the loop. So you respect them enough to tell them the truth. I think also helping them understand that you have committed to providing resources for them that help them through this uncertainty and this period of anxiety and transition, because this is a very difficult period for people, whether regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on. This is a difficult time for everyone.
Right.
So reassuring them that they have those mental health resources available to them, if that's not something that the organization is currently doing. If the organization does have that in place, remind them that those resources are there and available for them. And then I also think that, a third component of that is, look, there is uncertainty, but what makes us strong as an organization is coming together and collaborating so that we can continue to put that value and that good out into the world, because the world needs that good energy right now.
Right.
So helping them feel that, yes, still the work that they are doing is very important, that it matters, and that there's a purpose for them being there, and that they need to continue showing up and giving it their best.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer, and I think that builds respect and trust, and I gotta think that builds a little loyalty too, and yeah. Okay, got to wrap up, unfortunately, but I want people to get the book. I want them to be able to find you, and I know that if this message really struck some a chord in someone and resonated with someone, I know you coach, and I know you have a consulting practice, so I want people to be able to find that too, and if they want to talk to you, and so they can schedule something, let's give them all the details about how to do that.
Okay, sure. So if people would like to learn more and get in touch with me, they can find me online at drjennifernash.com. That's drjennifernash.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn. The handle is the same, Dr. Jennifer Nash. And we offer coaching services. We offer consulting services. We have an online masterclass that we just launched in terms of helping
Excellent.
people build their communication and leadership skills. And then also, obviously, the book. Oh, and we didn't talk about the Human Leader Index, which is a free assessment that people can take.
Well, tell me about it. We got 3 minutes. Let's go. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so the Human Leader Index is a cutting edge survey to help people see where do they fall on that human leader journey. Are they more towards one end of the spectrum, or maybe they haven't started putting people first yet? Or are they on the other end, like maybe Alan is, where, they're already demonstrating those human leader behaviors? So they can take a free assessment, they'll get a report of their results sent directly to their inbox, and it gives them some recommendations on how they can move forward on their human leader journey.
That sounds scary.
Yeah.
I think I'm afraid to take it, but I think I probably should.
Well, it's there and waiting for you. That's also available at my website.
Feedback is good, though, people. Feedback is good.
Yes.
Don't be afraid of feedback. I was joking. All right. Well, thank you for spending some time with us here on Bestseller Live. This is Dr. Jennifer Nash has joined us today. Her book, Be Human, Lead Human, is available. She is available for consulting and coaching. You can find her books, I'm sure, on Amazon and probably on the website. Mm-hmm. And we'll have that in the show notes down below. But anyway, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back. Cynthia and I will be back next week for a new episode. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me, Rhett.